I took the substitute teaching job because I thought a one-room schoolhouse sounded harmless. That was the word I kept using in my head. Harmless. Small class. Rural kids. Quiet community. Old building. A few days of worksheets, spelling practice, reading groups, and maybe tying someone's shoelaces. After student teaching in a middle school where 7th graders treated cruelty like a team sport, the idea of covering a tiny school in the Nebraska Sandhills sounded almost peaceful. That was what I told myself when I accepted. That was before I saw the rules. The school was called Mercy Well Schoolhouse. It sat almost 30 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by grass-covered dunes, cattle fences, windmills, and miles of empty sky. If you've never been to the Sandhills, you might picture Nebraska as flat. That's not right. Out there, the land rolls in long, soft waves, like an ocean that forgot how to move. Grass holds the hills together. Wind moves constantly. Roads seem to run forever, and still somehow lead nowhere. Mercy Well was not part of a district in the normal way, at least not the way I understood it. It was technically a public rural attendance site, maintained because several ranch families lived too far from town for daily transport to be practical. 7 students, all different ages, all taught in the same room. The regular teacher had taken medical leave. They needed someone for 2 weeks. The pay was better than it should have been. That should have been my first warning. The woman who called me was named Dr. Elaine Rusk, the county education coordinator. She sounded tired, formal, and relieved when I said I was available. "You'll need to stay on site during the week," she said. "On site?" "There's a teacher's room attached to the schoolhouse. Bed, bathroom, kitchenette. Most substitutes prefer it to driving in and out." "Most substitutes," a pause. Then she said, "We don't get many." I should have asked why. Instead, I asked about lesson plans. Dr. Rusk told me the previous teacher, Mrs. Weller, had left everything prepared. Attendance lists, curriculum folders, emergency contacts, daily schedule, behavior notes, and site-specific procedures. That last phrase stuck with me. What does site-specific mean? Another pause. "Mercy Well is old," she said. "Old buildings come with quirks." I almost laughed. "Like bad plumbing?" "Among other things." She emailed me directions and told me to arrive Sunday before sunset. Not before school Monday. Sunday before sunset. When someone tells you to arrive at a rural schoolhouse before dark, ask why. I didn't. I drove out there in late October with the sun already leaning low and the sky turning that huge pale gold you only see over open land. The last real town disappeared behind me. Then the gas station. Then the paved road. Then even the fences seemed farther apart. The final road was gravel, then dirt, then 2 tire tracks cutting through grass. The GPS stopped working 11 miles out, but Dr. Rusk had given me printed directions. Turn left at the leaning cottonwood. Continue until the 3rd cattle guard. Do not take the road with the white mailbox. Follow the windmill line south. Mercy Well. Schoolhouse sits on the east side of the old well. The white mailbox bothered me. I passed it around 5:12 p.m. It stood alone at the fork of a dirt road, leaning slightly, paint peeling, red flag raised. There was no house visible anywhere. On the side, written in black stick-on letters, was M. Well School. That looked like the turn, but the directions said not to take it, so I didn't. As I drove past, something thumped inside the mailbox. Once, then again, then 3 times quickly, like a small fist. I kept driving. The schoolhouse appeared 10 minutes later over the crest of a low hill. was exactly what you'd imagine if someone said, one-room schoolhouse. White clapboard walls, bell tower, red roof, tall narrow windows, a small front porch with 2 steps, a flagpole, a fenced yard, a gravel parking spot, a separate outhouse-looking storage shed out back, a windmill creaking beside an old stone well. It should have looked charming. It did not. The building stood alone in the grass like it had been dropped there and forgotten. The windows were dark. The bell in the tower hung still. The old well beside the windmill had a wooden cover chained across it. A woman waited on the porch. Dr. Rusk. I recognized her from the staff directory photo, though she looked older in person. Mid-50s, short brown-gray hair, long coat, practical boots, clipboard held tight to her chest. She watched my car come up the drive and checked her watch before I even parked. I stepped out into wind that smelled like dry grass, dust, and cold earth. "You made the correct turn," she said. "Good to know." "I mean it." She looked past my car toward the distant road. "Some people don't." The mailbox flashed in my mind, something knocking inside it. I decided not to mention that yet. Dr. Rusk unlocked the schoolhouse and walked me through quickly. Inside, the building was warmer than I expected. One large classroom, wood floor, chalkboards along the front and side walls, a cast iron stove in the back, though there was also modern heating. 7 student desks arranged by age rather than grade, a teacher's desk near the front, shelves of books, a piano against one wall, cubbies, coat hooks, a sink, a small office nook, a door leading to the teacher's room. It smelled like chalk, old wood, paper, dust, and something faintly metallic. The teacher's room was tiny but livable. Narrow bed, desk, lamp, mini fridge, microwave, bathroom, one window facing the well. I noticed the window had a curtain nailed shut from the inside, not hung, nailed. Dr. Rusk saw me looking at it. "Leave that closed." "Privacy?" "Yes." She said it too quickly. Back in the classroom, she showed me the folders Mrs. Weller had prepared. Math groups, reading groups, science activities, history unit, handwriting practice, emergency medical forms, bus arrangements, though only 2 students took the bus, and bus meant a county van. Then Dr. Rusk opened the top drawer of the teacher's desk and took out a black composition notebook. "This is the important one. Lesson plans? Procedures? Site-specific?" "Yes." She handed it to me. The cover had no label, only a strip of masking tape with my name written on it. That made my skin prickle. How did Mrs. Weller know my name? She didn't. Dr. Rusk looked away as she said it. I opened the notebook. The first page read, "For the substitute. Read before first bell, do not share with students, do not assume they do not already know." Below, that was a list, not laminated, written by hand in careful blue ink. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned, almost beautiful. There were 24 rules. Rule 1, arrive before sunset. If you arrive after sunset and see lights inside, do not enter. Rule 2, ring the school bell once at 8 a.m. Ringing it twice invites students not on the roster. Rule 3, there are 7 students. Count them at arrival, lunch, recess, and dismissal. Count by name, not by number. Rule 4, if an 8th desk appears, do not move it. Do not sit anyone there. Rule 5, if a student you do not recognize answers during roll, mark them absent. Rule 6, do not erase writing from the side chalkboard unless you wrote it yourself. Rule 7, if the children all go quiet at once, Close the blinds before asking why. Rule 8. Do not let any student use the well as a landmark in a drawing. Rule 9. If someone knocks from inside the coat closet, begin silent reading immediately. Rule 10. If the windmill stops while the wind is still blowing, keep the children indoors. Rule 11. At 11:43 a.m., do not look through the north windows. Rule 12. If a child asks whether school is over, ask them what year it is. If they answer 1934, tell them lessons continue. Rule 13. Do not play the piano after dark, even if you hear music from it. Rule 14. If the lunch pail with the red ribbon appears, put it on the teacher's desk and do not open it. Rule 15. During recess, count shadows. If there are more shadows than students, end recess early. Rule 16. If dust blows under the classroom door, do not sweep it until dismissal. Rule 17. If Mrs. Weller enters the room, ask her where she left her shoes. If she says, "by the well," do not let her teach. Rule 18. If the school bell rings by itself, have the children put their heads down until it stops. Rule 19. Never send a child outside alone. Rule 20. If the map of Nebraska changes, copy the new county lines into the log before leaving. Rule 21. If a student draws a house with no doors, collect the drawing and place it in the stove unburned. Rule 22. If Dr. Rusk calls after dark and tells you to leave, ask her who locked the well. If she says, "the county," stay inside. Rule 23. If you hear children reciting multiplication facts from underground, do not correct their answers. Rule 24. If every student is absent, teach the lesson anyway. I read the list. Then I read it again. When I looked up, Dr. Rusk was watching me carefully. "What is this?" "Procedures." "No, these are not procedures. They are at Mercy Well." I closed the notebook. "Is this a joke?" "No." "Is Mrs. Weller trying to scare off substitutes?" "No." "Then what is this?" Dr. Rusk took a slow breath. "Mercy Well has been a school longer than most of the ranches around it have been families. Buildings like this collect routines. Children come, children leave, teachers change. The building remembers what school is supposed to look like. That explains none of this. It explains more after your first day. I'm not staying if this is some kind of prank." Dr. Rusk looked toward the tall classroom windows. The sun was almost gone. "Then leave now." Again, just like every warning that matters, she gave me a chance. My bag was still in the car. The road was behind me. The sun had not fully set. I could leave. Instead, I thought about my rent. I thought about how many applications I had sent out. I thought about how this was only 2 weeks, and I stayed. Dr. Rusk nodded like she had expected that and disliked herself for it. She took a key ring from her pocket and placed it on the teacher's desk. Front door, teacher room, supply cabinet, stove latch, shed, gate. What about the well? There is no key for the well. Then why is it chained? She looked at me. Because there is a chain for the well. I hated that answer. Before she left, she walked to the side chalkboard. Most of the boards were clean, but the sideboard had one sentence written in faint chalk. "We will be good if you are." Dr. Rusk pointed to it. Rule 6. Do not erase writing unless I wrote it myself. Yes. Who wrote that? She picked up her clipboard. Not you. Then she left. I watched her car disappear down the dirt road, just as the sun slipped below the hills. The schoolhouse settled around me. Old wood creaked. The stove ticked, though it was not lit. Somewhere outside, the windmill turned slowly. I stood alone in the classroom with Mrs. Weller's rules in my hand and that chalk sentence on the board, "We will be good if you are." I unpacked because pretending to be practical is what people do when they are afraid. I put my clothes in the teacher's room dresser, set my toothbrush by the tiny sink, arranged the lesson folders on the desk, checked the locks, and made myself dinner from a microwave cup of soup. At 8:17 p.m., the piano played one note. Low, soft. I was in the teacher's room. I froze with the spoon halfway to my mouth. Rule 13 said do not play the piano after dark, even if you hear music from it. I was not playing it. Good. The piano played another note, then another, slowly, like someone learning where the keys were. I stayed in the teacher's room. The little window curtain nailed over the well-facing window moved slightly. There was no draft. The piano played a simple melody, a children's song. I recognized it after a few seconds. The alphabet song. It stopped at the letter M, then began again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, stop. Again, A, B, C. I turned off my lamp and sat on the bed in the dark until the music stopped. At 9:02, someone knocked from inside the coat closet. 3 knocks, small, polite, tap, tap, tap. Rule 9 said if someone knocks from inside the coat closet, begin silent reading immediately. I was alone, no students, no class, but I found a book on the teacher's desk, sat in the front row, and silently read Chapter 1 of The Boxcar Children, while something knocked from inside the closet every few minutes. Tap, tap, tap. At 10:30, I wrote in the logbook because Mrs. Weller had left one beside the rules. 8:17 p.m., piano played after dark. Did not enter room until music stopped. 9:02 p.m., knocking from coat closet. Began silent reading, no response given. When I finished, the side chalkboard changed. Not all at once. One letter faded, then another appeared. We will be good if you are became so far. I did not sleep much that night. The first school day began cold and bright. Sunrise turned the Sandhills gold. Wind moved through the grass. The schoolhouse looked almost innocent in daylight. Almost. At 7:42 a.m., the first student arrived, a girl named Paige, 12, oldest in the class. She wore a denim jacket, carried a green backpack, and looked at me like she already knew whether I would last. "Morning," she said. "Good morning. You must be Paige." She looked toward the side chalkboard, then back to me. "Did you read Mrs. Weller's book?" "Yes." "Good." She hung her coat on a hook and sat at the oldest desk. At 7:48, 2 brothers arrived, Caleb and Eli, 9 and 7, dropped off by their mother in a dusty pickup. Both boys had red hair and serious expressions. At 7:52, Mara arrived on a county van with her younger cousin June. Mara was 10, June was 6. At 7:57, the last 2 arrived together on horseback. I am not kidding. Their names were Hannah and Luke, 11 and 8. They tied the horse near the fence like this was normal, came inside, washed their hands, and sat down. 7 students. I counted by name: Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke, 7. At 8 o'clock, I rang the bell once, not twice, once. The sound carried across the empty hills. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, far away, another bell answered. Not an echo. Another bell. The students froze. I looked at Paige. She shook her head once. Do not react. So I didn't. Good morning, I said. Good morning, Miss Carter, the students replied together. I hadn't told them my name. I checked the attendance sheet. My name was printed at the top. Substitute, Miss Carter. Fine, probably fine. I took roll. Page. Here, Caleb. Here, Eli. Here, Mara. Here, June. Here, Hannah. Here, Luke. Here. Then a voice from the back of the room said, "Here." The students did not turn around. I did. There was an 8th desk. It sat near the coat closet. Old, smaller than the others. The wood was darker. The metal legs were rusted. No child sat in it, but the voice had come from there. Rule 4. If an 8th desk appears, do not move it. Do not sit anyone there. Rule 5. If a student you do not recognize answers during roll, mark them absent. My hand shook as I looked at the attendance sheet. There were only 7 names. Below Luke, an 8th line appeared. Blank. I marked it absent. The side chalkboard made a soft chalk squeak. A new line appeared beneath "so far." Rude. I capped my pen. "Math groups," I said. The children opened their books like nothing unusual had happened. The morning went almost normally after that. Almost. Paige worked independently on fractions. Caleb and Hannah practiced multiplication. Mara read aloud to Eli and June. Luke drew pictures of cattle in the margin of his worksheet and pretended he wasn't. The 8th desk remained empty. I tried not to look at it. At 10:15 during spelling, the children all went quiet at once. Not gradually, all at once. Pencils stopped. Pages stopped turning. Even breathing seemed to pause. Rule 7. If the children all go quiet at once, close the blinds before asking why. I moved to the windows, the north windows first, then east, then west. I closed every blind. Only then did I ask, "Why did everyone stop?" June whispered, "Someone's at the well." Rule 19 said never send a child outside alone. I did not send anyone. I did not look. I continued spelling. The children joined in after a minute, but softly. At 11:43 a.m., I did not look through the north windows. I watched the clock instead. The room darkened slightly. A shadow moved behind the blinds. Long, thin, as if someone very tall walked along the north side of the building, dragging one hand across the glass. The children put their heads down without being told. A voice outside whispered multiplication facts. 7 times 8 is 56. Correct. 6 times 9 is 54. Correct. 12 times 12 is 145. Wrong. I almost corrected it. Rule 23. If you hear children reciting multiplication facts from underground, do not correct their answers. This was not underground. It was outside the north windows. Still, I bit my tongue. The voice whispered, 12 times 12 is 145. Again and again, like it wanted me to correct it. I didn't. At lunch, I counted by name. Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke, 7. Then I noticed the lunch pail. It sat on the teacher's desk, small, metal, old, with a red ribbon tied around the handle. Rule 14. If the lunch pail with the red ribbon appears, put it on the teacher's desk and do not open it. It was already on the teacher's desk, so I left it. The children ate quietly. None of them looked at the pail, not once. At recess, I counted shadows. The children ran in the yard under a pale sun. Paige stood near the fence reading. Caleb and Eli kicked a ball. Mara and Hannah played jump rope with June. Luke crouched near the grass, drawing in dirt with a stick. 7 students, 7 shadows. Then the windmill stopped. The wind was still blowing. Rule 10. If the windmill stops while the wind is still blowing, keep the children indoors. Recess over, I called. Nobody argued. They moved fast. too fast. Paige grabbed June's hand and pulled her inside. I counted as they passed me. Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke, 7. Behind them, from the well, someone giggled. I shut the door. The windmill started turning again. At 1:05, I asked the students to draw their homes for social studies. I regretted it almost immediately. Rule 8. Do not let any student use the well as a landmark in a drawing. Rule 21. If a student draws a house with no doors, collect the drawing and place it in the stove unburned. I walked the rows as they drew. Paige drew a ranch house with a porch. Caleb drew a barn bigger than the house. Eli drew a dog in every window. Mara drew her grandmother's wind chimes. June drew a smiling sun. Hannah drew horses. Luke drew Mercy Well's schoolhouse. Not his house, the schoolhouse. The well stood beside it, dark, too large. I took the paper gently. Luke looked up at me. I didn't mean to. I know. His eyes filled with tears. I tried to draw home. On his page, the schoolhouse had no door. My hands went cold. Rule 21. I carried the drawing to the stove. The stove was cold. I opened the latch with the key Dr. Rusk had given me, placed the drawing inside unburned, and shut it. The classroom exhaled. Every child relaxed at once, except Luke. He stared at the stove like he had just watched me bury something alive. At 2:30, Dr. Rusk called. The phone on the teacher's desk rang. The number showed as county office. I answered. Mercy Well Schoolhouse, Miss Carter, speaking. Dr. Rusk said, "How is the first day?" I looked at the 8th desk, the lunch pail, the side chalkboard, the stove. Active. A pause. Then she said, "That's a good word." Everyone kept saying that. The windmill stopped, I said. Lunch pail appeared, 8th desk appeared. Luke drew the well. Did you follow procedure? Yes. Good. What is this place? Dr. Rusk was quiet. Then she said, "A school." That's what everyone keeps saying when they don't want to answer me. Because it is the only answer that doesn't invite worse questions while children are present. I lowered my voice. What happened to Mrs. Weller? The phone line crackled. Dr. Rusk said, "Ask her where she left her shoes." What? If she comes in, ask her where she left her shoes. The line went dead. At 3 o'clock, I dismissed the students. Not 1 minute early. Not 1 minute late. They packed quickly. Too quickly. I counted by name at the door. Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke, 7. The county van took Mara and June. The pickup took Caleb and Eli. Hannah and Luke left on horseback. Paige waited by the gate until her father's truck arrived. Before she got in, she looked back at me. "You did okay. Thanks. Don't sleep if the bell rings." Then she closed the truck door and left. I stood alone in the schoolyard while dust moved across the hills. At 3:17, the school bell rang by itself. Rule 18. If the school bell rings by itself, have the children put their heads down until it stops. But the children were gone. The bell rang again and again. Inside, the 8th desk scraped across the floor. I went back into the schoolhouse. The desk had moved to the center of the room. On top of it sat Luke's drawing, the one I had placed in the stove. The paper was wet now, not burned, wet. The schoolhouse in the drawing had changed. It had a door. The door was open, and standing inside the drawn doorway was Mrs. Weller, barefoot, smiling, with mud up to her ankles. Behind me, The real classroom door opened. A woman's voice said, "Class isn't over." I turned. An older woman stood on the threshold. Gray hair, long cardigan, teacher's badge clipped to her collar, bare feet, wet mud on her hem. I remembered Rule 17. "If Mrs. Weller enters the room, ask her where she left her shoes." My voice came out small. "Where did you leave your shoes?" Mrs. Weller smiled. "By the well." The school bell rang one final time, and every desk in the room filled with children I had never seen before. Mrs. Weller smiled from the doorway and said, "By the well." Then every desk in the room filled with children I had never seen before. Not 7 desks, not 8. Every desk, rows of them. They appeared between one blink and the next, stretching from the front chalkboard to the back wall. Old wooden desks packed so tightly there was barely room to walk between them. The classroom looked larger than it had a second before, longer, darker, older, and every desk had a child sitting in it. Some wore modern clothes, but most did not. Overalls, plain dresses, wool sweaters, button-up shirts with suspenders. One boy wore a flour sack patched into a shirt. One girl had a ribbon tied around her neck that was dark with old blood. Their faces were pale with dust and shadow. Their eyes stayed fixed on me. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the wind pushing against the schoolhouse walls. Mrs. Weller stepped inside. Barefoot, mud squished softly under each step. She looked exactly like the photo on Dr. Rusk's staff page, except thinner, grayer, and impossibly tired. Her hair was pinned back. Her cardigan hung loose from her shoulders. A teacher's badge was clipped to her collar, but her feet were bare, and her shoes were by the well. Rule 17. If Mrs. Weller enters the room, ask her where she left her shoes. If she says, "By the well," do not let her teach. I stood between her and the teacher's desk. "You can't be here." Her smile did not change. "School is in session." School ended at 3, for them. She gestured toward the rows of children. Dozens of blank faces watched me. One boy in the front row lifted his hand. Not politely, mechanically. His elbow bent like a hinge that had not been used in years. Mrs. Weller looked at him. "Yes, Peter." "May I be excused?" he asked. His voice sounded far away, like it came from the bottom of a pipe. Mrs. Weller's smile widened. "No." The boy lowered his hand. I backed toward the teacher's desk, keeping myself between Mrs. Weller and the front chalkboard. "You need to leave." "No teacher leaves before dismissal," she said. "The students are dismissed." She tilted her head. "Are they?" The side chalkboard squeaked. The message changed. So far became, "Take roll." I looked at the rows. No, absolutely not. Rule 3 said there were 7 students. Count them by name, not by number. Rule 5 said if a student I did not recognize answered during roll, mark them absent. But this was not my class. These were not the 7 students. The attendance sheet on the teacher's desk fluttered. Pages appeared behind the original roster, old paper yellowed at the edges. Names wrote themselves down the lines in neat blue ink. Peter Lang, Elsie Holt, Ruth Weaver, Samuel Pike, Annie Bell, Thomas Creed. More names, rows and rows of them. Mrs. Weller stepped closer. "Begin." I did not touch the attendance sheet. Her smile faltered, just slightly. "Substitutes take attendance." Not after dismissal. The children all inhaled at once, a room full of dead lungs remembering how. Mrs. Weller's eyes sharpened. You don't know what dismissal means here. Then teach me. Her expression became almost sad. That is how it starts. The school bell above us rang once. The sound punched through the room. Every child lowered their head onto crossed arms. Except Mrs. Weller. Except me. Rule 18. If the school bell rings by itself, have the children put their heads down until it stops. The children had done it on their own. Mrs. Weller looked up toward the bell tower. Her face changed. Fear, just for a second. Then she recovered. I grabbed the black notebook of rules from the desk and opened it with shaking hands. There had to be something. Some rule I had missed. Something about after dismissal. Something about classrooms full of children who should not exist. But the rules were the same. 24. No 25. No help. The bell rang again. Mrs. Weller took one step backward. The children kept their heads down. A low sound came from outside. The windmill had stopped. I knew it before I looked. The wind still pushed against the windows. The building creaked in it, but the windmill had stopped. Rule 10. If the windmill stops while the wind is still blowing, keep the children indoors. The bell rang a third time. A voice came from outside the schoolhouse. Not loud, not close, but clear. A child's voice. School's over. Every child at the desk stiffened. Mrs. Weller whispered. No. The voice outside repeated. School's over. The children began to lift their heads. Mrs. Weller slammed one hand onto the teacher's desk. Eyes down. The children froze. I realized then that Mrs. Weller was not the worst thing here. She was afraid, too. Whatever stood outside had rung the bell. Whatever stood outside wanted the children to look up. The voice came again. School's over. This time, it sounded like Luke. My Luke. The 8-year-old from my real class. I almost moved toward the door. Mrs. Weller looked at me quickly. Do not answer that. You said you're the teacher. I am. Then tell me what's outside. Her eyes flicked toward the windows. The reason we keep teaching. The north blinds trembled. Something long moved behind them. The side chalkboard changed again. Keep them busy. For once, the board and Mrs. Weller seemed to agree. I swallowed hard. Silent reading, I said. The children stayed frozen. Mrs. Weller stared at me. I repeated louder. Silent reading. Everyone. Now. The desks creaked. One by one, the children reached into their desks and pulled out books. Old primers, torn readers, modern paperbacks, blank slates. A few held books so rotted they left flakes on the floor. But they opened them, and they read silently. Mrs. Weller exhaled. The bell stopped. The voice outside stopped. The windmill began turning again. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Weller looked at me with something almost like respect. You're not useless. Thanks. It wasn't a compliment. I figured. The classroom had stabilized. That was the only word for it. The impossible rows remained, but the walls no longer stretched farther away. The children read. The windmill turned. The bell hung silent. I lowered my voice. Are they dead? Mrs. Weller looked over the students. Some. That answer made my stomach tighten. Some? Some are waiting. Some are remembered. Some are mistakes. What does that mean? It means you should not ask questions during silent reading. One of the children in the third row raised a hand, a girl in a faded yellow dress. Mrs. Weller said, "Ignore her." The girl's hand remained up. I looked at the rules. No rule about raised hands. I should have ignored her. I didn't. Yes? Mrs. Weller closed her eyes. The girl in yellow looked at me. May I go home? The entire classroom went still. Mrs. Weller whispered, You shouldn't have called on her. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Please, teacher, I know the way. The side chalkboard wrote, No, she does not. The girl turned her head toward the board, her mouth open too wide, not in surprise, in hunger. The room darkened. Mrs. Weller snapped, Class, continue reading. Pages turned. The girl in yellow stood, her desk scraped backward. May I go home? She asked again. I remembered Rule 12. If a child asks whether school is over, ask them what year it is. If they answer 1934, tell them lessons continue. She had not asked whether school was over. She had asked to go home. Another gap. I looked at Mrs. Weller. She shook her head once. Do not. The girl took one step into the aisle. Mud spread under her shoes. Not dirt, wet mud, well mud. I asked, What year is it? Mrs. Weller flinched. The girl smiled. 1934. My mouth went dry. Lessons continue, I said. The girl's smile collapsed. For a moment, she looked like a child again, small, lost, angry. Then she sat. The room brightened slightly. Mrs. Weller let out a breath. Good. What happened in 1934? She looked toward the well-facing wall. The year the well was locked. Of course, I wanted to ask more. I did not. At 4:08 p.m., dust blew under the classroom door. A thin line of pale powder slid across the floor from the threshold. Rule 16. If dust blows under the classroom door, do not sweep it until dismissal. But dismissal had already happened, or maybe not. The dust spread slowly into the room. The children lifted their feet onto the bars of their desks without being told. Mrs. Weller did the same, stepping onto the low shelf under the chalkboard. I stared at her. She looked at my feet. I lifted them onto the chair rung. The dust moved like it was searching. It slid under desks, around chair legs, past the coat closet. Then it gathered beneath the 8th desk, the empty one, the desk that had appeared during morning roll. A hand pushed up through the dust, small, gray, then another. A child crawled out from under the 8th desk. A boy, maybe 7 years old. He wore clothes from no time I recognized. A shirt buttoned wrong, pants too short, bare feet caked in pale dust. He looked at me. Here, he said. Rule 5. If a student you do not recognize answers during roll, mark them absent. I grabbed the attendance sheet. The blank 8th line waited. The boy smiled. Here, he repeated. I wrote absent. The boy's smile vanished. The dust collapsed around him. He sank back under the desk without a sound. The room breathed again. Mrs. Weller watched me carefully. You read the rules, yes, but you don't understand them yet. No, she nodded. That is better than thinking you do. At 4:30, the phone rang. I looked at Mrs. Weller. She shook her head. After dismissal, the phone belongs to outside. The phone rang again. The caller ID read, County Office, Dr. Rusk, Rule 22. If Dr. Rusk calls after dark and tells you to leave, ask her who locked the well. If she says, the county, stay inside. It was not dark yet, but the sky outside looked strange through the thin gaps in the blinds. Not late afternoon, not evening. A dim yellow gray, like dust, had risen over the whole world. The phone rang a third time. I picked it up. Mercy Well Schoolhouse. Dr. Rusk's voice came through. "Miss Carter, listen carefully. You need to leave now." Mrs. Weller's face went pale. I asked, "Who locked the well?" A pause. Then Dr. Rusk said, "The county." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I did not answer. Mrs. Weller whispered, "Good. Was that her?" "Yes, but not safe?" "No. How does that make sense?" "She wants you to leave." That part was true. The phone continued ringing. The children kept reading silently. Finally, the ringing stopped. Then someone knocked from inside the coat closet. Tap, 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 Rule 9. Begin silent reading immediately. They were already silently reading. The knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. A voice from inside the closet whispered, "Miss Carter?" It was Paige, the real Paige, the oldest student, but she had gone home. I looked at Mrs. Weller. She whispered, "No." The voice came again. "Miss Carter, please, I missed my ride." "No, no, no, no." The coat closet door moved slightly. Something inside dragged fingernails against wood. Paige's voice said, "It's cold out here." I did not answer. The students read silently. The voice changed. Now it was Luke. "I drew home wrong." The stove latch clicked. The drawing inside wanted out. Mrs. Weller moved to stand in front of the stove. "Keep reading," she said to the class. The coat closet knocked harder. Tap, tap, tap. Then the lunch pail with the red ribbon rattled on the teacher's desk. I had forgotten it was still there. Rule 14 said, "Put it on the teacher's desk and do not open it." It was on the desk. It began shaking. Metal against wood, soft at first, then harder. The red ribbon tightened around the handle by itself. Mrs. Weller said, "Don't touch it." I wasn't planning to. "You will be." "What?" The lunch pail stopped rattling. From inside came the sound of a child crying. Not Paige, not Luke, not anyone I recognized. Hungry crying. Small, weak. The kind of crying that makes adults move before they think. Mrs. Weller's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Don't!" I stepped back. The child inside the lunch pail sobbed. "I'm hungry." My hands curled. "Mrs." Weller said, "That is how it opens. What's inside? Need." The crying continued. "I'm hungry." The children at the desks began turning pages faster, too fast, like they were trying to drown out the sound. The side chalkboard wrote, "Do not feed what the well kept." The lunch pail snapped open 1 inch. A smell filled the room. Rotten water, old bread, wet metal. Mrs. Weller lunged and slammed it shut with both hands. The children screamed, not in fear, in unison. The school bell rang. Once. The lunch pail jumped under Mrs. Weller's palms. The coat closet door banged from inside. The stove rattled. The windmill stopped. The entire classroom erupted at once. Mrs. Weller shouted, "Heads down!" The children dropped their heads. I did too without thinking. The school bell rang again. From outside, the Luke voice called. "School's over." Every window blind snapped open. Bright yellow light flooded the room. Not sunlight, dust light. North windows. At 11:43, do not look through the north windows. It was not 11:43, but the north windows were open, and something stood outside them. Tall, thin, too tall for a person. Its shadow stretched into the room across the desks, across the children's bent heads, across my hands. I stared down at the floor. The thing outside tapped one long finger against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then it spoke in Dr. Rusk's voice. "Dismiss them." Mrs. Weller, head down beside the desk, whispered, "No." The thing said, "They've been here long enough." Mrs. Weller trembled. The voice changed. A man now. older, stern. Mary Weller, dismiss your class. Her first name, Mary. The children began crying softly into their folded arms. The tall thing outside said, "You can't keep them forever," Mrs. Weller whispered. "I can keep them until someone locks it right." The room went cold. The thing outside stopped tapping. "What did you say?" I whispered. Mrs. Weller shook her head. "No questions." Too late, the side chalkboard wrote, "She knows." The tall shadow outside the window stretched farther into the room. A handprint appeared on the glass. Long fingers, too many joints. The voice outside became gentle. "Mary, where did you leave your shoes?" Mrs. Weller began to cry. Not like a ghost, like an old teacher who had held the door shut for too long. "By the well," she whispered. The school bell rang a third time. The windmill began turning backward. Every student lifted their head, not just the 7, all of them, dozens. Their eyes turned toward Mrs. Weller, then toward me. The girl in yellow asked, "Is school over? Rule 12, ask what year it is." But before I could speak, every child in the room answered together. 1934, Mrs. Weller shouted, "Lessons continue." The classroom shook. The children screamed. The tall thing outside laughed, and the floorboards beneath the 8th desk began to open. Not break. Open, like a trapdoor had been there all along. Darkness waited below. From underground came children's voices reciting multiplication facts. 7 times 8 is 56. 6 times 9 is 54. 12 times 12 is 145. Wrong. Again, wrong. I bit down on my tongue to stop myself from correcting them. Blood filled my mouth. Mrs. Weller grabbed my wrist. "If they open the well under the room, run to the stove." "What?" "Stove, not door, not office. Stove." The floor under the 8th desk widened. The desk tilted and slid halfway into darkness. The absent boy's hand reached up from below. "Here," he said. I wrote "absent" again across the attendance sheet. The hand withdrew. The floor paused. Mrs. Weller shoved the lunch pail toward me. "On the desk. It is on the desk. No, your desk." I looked at the teacher's desk, then at her. "I'm the teacher?" For now. The words hit harder than they should have. I grabbed the lunch pail and placed it directly in the center of the teacher's desk. The crying inside stopped. The classroom steadied. The floorboards stopped opening. The tall thing outside shrieked. The windows cracked. Mrs. Weller ran to the stove. "Luke's drawing." I followed. The stove latch was hot. Too hot. I used the key anyway. Inside was the drawing. The schoolhouse with no door. The door added. Mrs. Weller, barefoot, in the drawn doorway. But now there was something else. The well beside the drawn schoolhouse had no cover, and children were climbing out of it. Mrs. Weller grabbed the paper. It did not burn her. She handed it to me. "Place it in the log." "Why?" "Because drawings are maps if the school believes them." I shoved the drawing into the black notebook between the pages of rules. The moment I closed it, the side chalkboard changed. Map held. The tall thing outside stopped screaming. The blinds dropped shut. The windmill resumed turning normally. The floor beneath the 8th desk closed. Silence fell. Real silence. The students slowly raised their heads. Only 7 desks remained occupied. Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke, my actual class. The others were gone. Mrs. Weller was still there, standing near the stove, barefoot, muddy, exhausted. The clock above the chalkboard read 3:01 p.m. dismissal time. Again. I looked at the windows. The sun outside was bright and normal. The children stared at me, waiting. Mrs. Weller whispered, "Dismiss them by name." I swallowed. Paige, dismissed. Paige stood, grabbed her backpack, and walked to the door. Caleb, dismissed. Caleb followed. Eli, dismissed. Mara, dismissed. June, dismissed. Hannah, dismissed. Luke, dismissed. One by one, they left. No extra children, no eighth voice, no desk moving. Outside, their rides waited exactly as they had before. The van, the pickup, the horse, Paige's father's truck. I counted them at the door by name. 7 left, 7 gone. Then I shut the door. Mrs. Weller stood behind me. "You did better than I did." I turned. "What happened here?" She looked toward the well-facing wall. This time, she answered. "In 1934, a dust storm came during school, worse than anyone had seen. Windmills stopped. Sky went black at noon. Children were kept inside, like they should have been. The well?" Her face tightened. "One child was missing." "Who?" She looked at the 8th desk. It was still there, empty. "My son." The room felt suddenly smaller. "He fell in?" "No." The word came out sharp, then softer. "No, he was put there." I looked at the side chalkboard. It remained blank. Mrs. Weller continued. "The town was dying, wells going dry, cattle dying, children sick. People said Mercy Well still had water. People said the school stood because of it." My skin went cold. "They sacrificed him?" She closed her eyes. "They called it a bargain." The wind pressed against the schoolhouse. "Afterward," she said, "the well gave water. The school stayed open, but children started hearing lessons from below. Desks appeared, names on roll that no one remembered. The well wanted students. Always students." "And you?" I tried to stop it. "By teaching?" "By keeping routine. Schools run on routine. Bells, roll, lessons, recess, lunch, dismissal. Routine gives children shape. The well takes the ones who lose shape." I thought of Luke drawing the schoolhouse instead of home. "Why are your shoes by the well?" Mrs. Weller looked down at her bare feet. "Mistake." "What mistake?" "I went out after him." "Your son?" She nodded. "I heard him calling. I knew the rule. Never send a child outside alone. But I was his mother before I was his teacher." Her voice broke. "I took off my shoes so I wouldn't wake the others. I went to the well. I looked down." "What did you see?" She looked at me. "A classroom." My mouth went dry. "Full of children? Full of teachers." The old school bell rang once, softly, not from the tower, from underground. Mrs. Weller flinched. "They don't have long," she said. "Who?" "Your students." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "The well has Luke's drawing. Even held in the log, it knows he drew home as school. That makes him easy." "No." "Yes. How do I stop it?" Mrs. Weller looked toward the teacher's room. "The window facing the well. The curtain is nailed shut." I noticed. Behind it is the last rule. There are only 24. There were only 24 I could leave where Dr. Rusk would find them. The room darkened slightly. Mrs. Weller began to fade at the edges. "Find the last rule before morning. Wait." She looked at me. "If you see me again and I ask to teach, ask where you left your shoes. And if I say by the well, don't let you teach." Her eyes filled with tears. "No matter how tired I look." Then she was gone. The schoolhouse stood empty. Only the 8th desk remained. On top of it sat a pair of muddy women's shoes. Beside them was a child's slate. Written on it in chalk, "Mother was absent." The school bell rang again from underground. And from somewhere beneath the floor, Luke's voice began reciting, 12 times 12 is 145. The voice under the floor said it again. 12 times 12 is 145. I stood in the empty classroom with the muddy shoes on the 8th desk and the child's slate beside them. Mother was absent. The words looked freshly written. Chalk dust clung to the slate's edges. The handwriting was small and careful, the kind a child uses when they want the teacher to be proud. Under the floorboards, Luke's voice repeated the wrong answer. 12 times 12 is 145. Every instinct in me wanted to correct him. That is what teachers do. A student makes an error, and your body moves before your mind does. You help. You guide. You say, try again. You ask, what is 12 times 10? What is 12 times 2? You scaffold. You encourage. You bring them back. But Rule 23 said if I heard children reciting multiplication facts from underground, I was not to correct their answers. So I bit my tongue again. There was still blood in my mouth from the first time. Luke's voice whispered through the floorboards. 12 times 12 is 145. Then, softer. Miss Carter? I stepped back from the 8th desk. No, I whispered. The side chalkboard wrote one word. Good. Then it wiped itself clean. The schoolhouse felt different after Mrs. Weller disappeared. Not quiet. Waiting. The kind of waiting a classroom does when students are gone, but their energy remains. Chairs slightly crooked, chalk dust in the air, papers stacked on desks, a half-finished lesson on the board, a silence shaped like children. The muddy shoes sat on the 8th desk. I did not touch them. The slate said, Mother was absent. I understood enough to be afraid of understanding more. Mrs. Weller had told me to find the last rule before morning. The teacher's room, the window facing the well, the nailed curtain. I did not want to go in there. The little attached room had seemed small and plain when I unpacked. A bed, a desk, a kitchenette, bathroom, one window with a curtain nailed shut from the inside. Leave that closed, Dr. Rusk had said. Privacy, I had asked. Yes, she had lied. I took the black composition notebook from the teacher's desk and held it tight against my chest. Luke's drawing was inside it now, pressed between the rule pages. A drawing was a map, if the school believed it. I did not know if carrying that map helped or doomed me. The classroom floor creaked as I walked toward the teacher's room. The 8th desk stayed where it was. The shoes stayed on top. The slate turned by itself with a soft scrape. I stopped. On the back, new words appeared. She left me. I closed my eyes. No, that was bait. Maybe it was true. Maybe Mrs. Weller had left her son. Maybe she had tried to save him. Maybe both things were true in the way old tragedies make guilt out of every choice. It did not matter right then. The well wanted me emotional. It wanted me correcting, comforting, answering, teaching the wrong class. I walked into the teacher's room and shut the door behind me. The room was colder than the classroom. The bed was still unmade from the sleepless night before. My bag sat half open by the dresser. The tiny lamp flickered on the desk, though I had turned it off before school. The kitchenette faucet dripped once, then again, then stopped. The nailed curtain covered the small window facing the well. It was thick brown fabric, old and sun-faded. 4 nails held it to the wooden frame. Not thumbtacks, nails. deep ones. Someone had wanted that curtain to stay shut. I set the notebook on the bed and searched the desk. Nothing. Drawer. Empty. Under the mattress. Nothing. Behind the little mirror. Nothing. The last rule had to be behind the curtain. Of course it did. I stood in front of it, listening. Outside, the windmill creaked. Slow. Steady. Wind still blowing. Good. The well was on the other side of that wall. The chained cover. The thing misses. Weller had looked into. The thing beneath the floor had used Luke's voice. I grabbed the first nail with my fingers and pulled. It did not move. I found a flat screwdriver in the desk drawer and wedged it under the nail head. The old wood groaned. The nail squealed out a 1/4 inch. The windmill stopped. I froze. Outside, wind continued brushing against the walls. Rule 10. If the windmill stops while the wind is still blowing, keep the children indoors. The children were gone. Dismissed. At least my 7 were. But the room beyond the wall no longer felt empty. From the classroom came the soft scrape of chairs. One chair, then another, then many. I did not open the teacher's room door. I pulled the first nail free. It dropped into my palm, cold and slightly wet. The second nail came easier. Behind me, from the classroom, a child whispered, "Teacher?" I kept working. The third nail bent halfway out, then snapped. The curtain sagged on one side. A thin blade of light appeared at the edge of the window. Not sunset light, not moonlight, pale yellow dust light. I angled my face away and pulled the last nail. The curtain fell. I closed my eyes before it hit the floor. The room went cold. Something outside breathed against the glass. I did not look. I felt along the window frame with one hand. Wood, peeling paint, dust, a groove cut into the lower sill. No paper, no notebook, no rule. Something tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Mrs. Weller's voice whispered from outside. "Open it." I kept my eyes closed. "Where did you leave your shoes?" I asked. Silence. Then she said, "By the well." I stepped back from the window. "You can't teach." Her voice changed. Not angry, sad. "Then who will?" The classroom door opened behind me. I heard it. I had shut it. I knew I had shut it. The teacher's room filled with the sound of children breathing. Dozens of them. I turned, still keeping my eyes shut, and felt for the notebook on the bed. My fingers found the cover. The masking tape with my name on it had changed. It no longer said Miss Carter. It said, "Substitute until dismissed." The children behind me began reciting. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. Their voices were soft, layered, too many ages, too many years. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. I clutched the notebook. The voice outside the window whispered, "Look at the well." No. Every teacher looks eventually. No. Mary did, the children continued. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. The room tilted slightly. The floor beneath me felt less like wood and more like packed dirt. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. I kept my eyes closed and ran my hand along the fallen curtain on the floor. Maybe the rule was stitched into it. Maybe written on the back. I lifted it. My fingers brushed raised letters. Thread. Embroidery. I opened one eye just enough to look down at the inside of the curtain, keeping the window out of sight. Words had been stitched there in black thread. Rule 25. If the well learns a child's home, give the school a different door. I read it 3 times. It made no sense. Give the school a different door. The children stopped reciting. From under the floor, Luke's voice said, 10 times 10 is 100. Correct. 11 times 11 is 121. Correct. 12 times 12 is... He paused. I held my breath. The classroom waited. The well waited. Luke whispered, 145. I did not correct him. The voice outside the window tapped the glass again. Give the school a different door, Mrs. Weller whispered, or something using her. Open this one. No, the window. A door. That was what it wanted. If I opened the well-facing window, I would be giving the school a different door. But to where? The well. The thing had just told me to open it, so it had to be wrong. Unless it knew I would think that. I hated the rules then. I hated how they never explained themselves until you were already bleeding from the lesson. I backed out of the teacher's room, notebook and curtain in my arms, eyes still tilted away from the window. The classroom was full again. Dozens of desks, dozens of children. But this time my 7 were there too. Paige, Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, Luke. They sat in the front row, pale and terrified, still wearing the clothes they had left in. Luke's drawing lay on his desk, the schoolhouse with no door, except now the drawn door was open wider. The well in the drawing was open too. A line connected them. The school had learned his home. The well had used it. Miss Carter, Paige said quietly, we're not supposed to be here. I know. June started crying. Mara held her hand. Mrs. Weller stood beside the chalkboard, not at the door now, inside, still barefoot, still muddy. She looked exhausted in a way that hurt to see. I asked anyway. Where did you leave your shoes? Her lips trembled. By the well. Then you can't teach. I know. She stepped away from the board. The chalk moved by itself behind her. Dismissal requires a door. I held up the curtain. What does Rule 25 mean? Mrs. Weller looked at it and closed her eyes. I hoped no one would need that. What does it mean? She looked at Luke. He stared down at his drawing, crying silently. When the well learns a child's home, it can call them from it. Bedroom, kitchen, barn, school, wherever the child believes they belong. If Luke drew the school as home, then the well can bring him here whenever it wants. Then how do I stop it? Give the school another door, one that does not open to the well. How? Mrs. Weller looked toward the front of the classroom, the actual door, the one leading outside, the one students had used all day. The building only has one true door, she said. No, it has the teacher's room door. That is for teachers. The front door? That is for students. The window? That is for the well. I looked at the stove. Mrs. Weller followed my gaze. Her face went still. The stove is not a door. But you told me to run to it. I told you to run to it if the well opened under the room. Why? Because fire remembers what water can't keep. The stove sat cold and black in the back of the room. The drawing had been placed in it earlier. The drawing had come back wet. But when I had placed it in the notebook, the chalkboard said, map held, not destroyed, held. A drawing was a map. A stove could be a door if the school believed it. I looked at Luke. Can you draw another door? His face went white. I don't want to draw anymore. I know. The room shook. The well outside groaned. A deep wooden sound. The chained cover shifting. The children at the old desks began whispering. Door. 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 Mrs. Weller stepped toward me. If he draws it, the well may follow the line. Then what do we do? She looked at the stove again. Make it open somewhere else. Where? For the first time, Mrs. Weller looked afraid to answer. Not home. The side chalkboard wrote, "School is not home." I stared at those words. Then I understood. That was the lesson. Luke had drawn the school as home. The well had used that. So the new door had to teach the opposite. School is not home. School is where children come and leave. Routine, arrival, lessons, recess, lunch, dismissal. Dismissal mattered because school had to end. The well wanted endless class. Mrs. Weller had kept teaching because she thought routine could hold the children. But the last routine was leaving. I knelt beside Luke's desk. "You don't have to draw home," I said. His face crumpled. "But I don't know how to get there." "That's okay. Draw the road away from school." His hand shook. "I can't." "Yes, you can." The room darkened. From outside, the well chain rattled. Mrs. Weller shouted, "Children, heads down!" Every child put their head down, except Luke, my 7. The old rows, all of them, dozens of heads on desks. The school bell rang by itself. Once, then again. Rule 18, heads down until it stops. Luke held the pencil. I held the paper steady. He drew. A small door on the schoolhouse, then a path, not toward the well, away from it, over the hill, toward a fence, a road, a truck, a house with lights in the windows. The well outside screamed. Not like a person. Like wind forced through a throat full of dirt. The school bell rang faster. The old children kept their heads down, trembling. Mrs. Weller stood between the chalkboard and the windows, arms spread like she could hold the whole room together by will. Luke drew the path longer. The paper grew wet under his pencil. Black water seeped through the page. "Keep going," I said. "I'm trying." The pencil snapped. Luke sobbed. Without thinking, Paige stood and handed him hers. The room turned toward her. Every old child lifted their head. "No," Mrs. Weller whispered. Paige froze. Rule 18, heads down until the bell stops. The bell had not stopped. Paige had raised her head. The tall shadow appeared behind the north blinds. Its long fingers touched the glass. Paige's eyes went blank. I grabbed her shoulders and forced her down. "Head down!" She gasped like she had been underwater. The old children lowered their heads again. Luke kept drawing with Paige's pencil. He drew the road all the way to the edge of the page. Then he wrote in uneven letters, "Away." The school bell stopped. Mrs. Weller sagged against the chalkboard. I took the drawing carefully. It was cold and wet. The black water on it tried to run toward the well in the picture. I folded the page once, then carried it to the stove. The stove latch was locked. Of course it was. My keys were on the teacher's desk. Across the room, beside the lunch pail, beside the 8th desk, beside the muddy shoes. The well chain outside snapped. One metallic crack. Then another. The cover was opening. I ran for the keys. The lunch pail jumped. The red ribbon unwound. A child inside whispered, "I'm hungry." I grabbed the keys without looking at it. The 8th desk scraped toward me. The muddy shoes fell to the floor and landed upright, as if invisible feet had stepped into them. Mrs. Weller screamed, "Don't let me teach!" Her body jerked toward the front board. The shoes moved. One step, then another, toward her. If they reached her feet, I knew she would not be Mrs. Weller anymore. She would be the teacher the well wanted, the one who never dismissed. I ran to the stove. Wrong key. Wrong key. Outside, the well cover slammed open. Cold air rushed through the room from nowhere. The old children began reciting from beneath their desks. 12 times 12 is 145. 12 times 12 is 145. 12 times 12 is 145. I found the stove key, opened the latch. The muddy shoes crossed the room toward Mrs. Weller. She backed away, sobbing. "Mary," a child's voice called from outside. "Mother," Mrs. Weller's face broke. Her son, not Luke, her son, the first child, the 8th desk, the bargain. "Mother," he called again. "I'm still absent." Mrs. Weller turned toward the door. "No," I shouted. She stopped. The shoes kept walking toward her. I opened the stove. Inside was not ash, not iron, not fire. It was a little road, drawn in pencil, stretching away into darkness. A paper road, a child's map. I shoved Luke's drawing into the stove. The road inside brightened. The schoolhouse shook. The chalkboards cracked. The well outside roared. The stove door tried to slam shut on my hand. I pulled back just in time and latched it. "Now what?" I shouted. Mrs. Weller looked at the stove. "Dismiss them." The old children lifted their heads. All of them. Dozens. Hundreds now, maybe, the room stretching again behind them. My 7 sat in the front row, terrified. I stood at the front of the classroom. My hand shook. My voice did too, but I spoke. "Paige, dismissed." Paige stood. The stove door opened by itself. Inside, instead of flames, I saw the road Luke had drawn. Paige looked at me, then at the stove. Then she walked toward it. "Wait," I said. "Not through." Mrs. Weller whispered. "Through. She's alive. Then the door will know where to send her." Paige swallowed, then stepped into the stove. She did not burn. She vanished into the drawn road. I nearly collapsed, but the room was waiting. "Caleb, dismissed." Caleb stood, jaw tight, trying not to cry. He walked into the stove and disappeared. "Eli, dismissed." Eli followed. "Mara, dismissed." Mara squeezed June's hand before letting go. "June, dismissed." June shook her head. "I don't want to." Mara's voice came faintly from somewhere far away. "It's okay." June stepped into the stove and vanished. "Hannah, dismissed." Hannah went. Then Luke. He stared at me. "I drew it right?" "Yes," I said. "You drew it right." He looked at Mrs. Weller. She looked at him like he was every child she had failed and every child she had saved. Then Luke walked into the stove. Gone. The classroom was full of the others now, old children, waiting. Mrs. Weller whispered, "Keep going. I don't know their names." The attendance sheets on the teacher's desk flew open. Names filled every line. Peter Lang, Elsie Holt, Ruth Weaver, Samuel Pike, Annie Bell, Thomas Creed, hundreds. My throat tightened. If I read them all, read until the bell stops. So I did. Peter Lang, dismissed. A boy in the front row stood and walked into the stove. Elsie Holt, dismissed. A girl in yellow stood. The one who had asked to go home. Before stepping into the stove, she looked at me. This time, she only looked like a child. Ruth Weaver, dismissed. Samuel Pike, dismissed. Annie Bell, dismissed. Thomas Creed, dismissed. One by one, children stood and walked into the stove. Some smiled, some cried, some looked confused, some carried books, some held lunch pails, some clutched slates, some wore dust masks, some were barefoot, some dripped well water onto the floor. The bell rang above us, steady, not frantic now. Each name made it softer. Mrs. Weller stood beside me, reading names when my voice started to fail. Her muddy shoes waited near the chalkboard, unable to reach her. The 8th desk remained occupied now. A small boy sat there, barefoot, dusty. He watched Mrs. Weller. She saw him. Her voice broke. Samuel Weller, dismissed. The room went silent. The boy did not move. Mrs. Weller covered her mouth. Samuel Weller, she said again. Dismissed. He looked at her. You were absent. She nodded, crying. I was. You left me. I did. Why? The well outside went quiet. Every remaining child watched. Mrs. Weller knelt in front of the 8th desk. Because I was afraid, she said. Because I heard you calling, and I looked down, and when I saw what had you, I ran for help instead of reaching. By the time I came back, they had locked the cover. The boy's face did not change. I waited. I know. I called. I know. You taught everyone else. Mrs. Weller sobbed. I thought if I kept teaching, I could keep them from joining you. Samuel looked toward the stove. The road inside glowed softly. Is school over? Rule 12. Ask what year it is. But this was not that question anymore. Mrs. Weller looked at me. I did not know if I was allowed to answer. Then the side chalkboard wrote one final instruction. Tell the truth. Mrs. Weller turned back to her son. Yes, she said. School is over. The well screamed. The muddy shoes burst apart into dust. Samuel stood. Mrs. Weller reached for him, then stopped herself. He walked past her. At the stove, he paused. Are you coming? Mrs. Weller looked at me. Her face was full of fear, not of the well, of hope. I looked at the attendance sheet. One name remained at the bottom. Mary Weller. I understood. Teachers leave last. Mary Weller, I said. Dismissed. She closed her eyes. The years fell off her face. Not completely, but enough. For one moment, she looked like a young teacher in a dust storm, frightened and brave, and too human for any legend the school had made from her. She stepped into the stove after her son. The bell stopped. The stove door closed by itself. The classroom was empty. 7 desks, no 8th desk, no muddy shoes, no lunch pail, no rows of old children, no Mrs. Weller. The side chalkboard was blank. Outside, dawn had begun. I did not remember the night passing. Maybe it hadn't. Maybe the school had kept time, folded until the lesson ended. I opened the front door. The schoolyard was pale and quiet. The windmill turned slowly. The well cover lay open. The chain was broken. I should have run. Instead, I walked to it. The old stone well stood beside the windmill, dark and ordinary looking in morning light. The wooden cover hung crooked from one hinge. The chain lay in the grass. I looked down. I know. Every rule, every warning, every story says not to look. But the well was not calling then. No voices, no recitation, no crying child, no wrong multiplication, just darkness and the smell of cold stone. At the bottom, far below, I saw a classroom, empty desks, a chalkboard, a teacher's desk, a stove. The chalkboard read, "No class today." Then the image faded, and there was only water, real water, still, dark, quiet. Behind me, tires crunched on gravel. I turned. Dr. Rusk's car pulled into the schoolyard. She stepped out slowly, her face pale as she saw the open well, the broken chain, and me standing beside it. "You found the last rule," she said. I nodded. Her eyes moved to the schoolhouse. "Mrs. Weller, dismissed." Dr. Rusk put a hand over her mouth. For a second, I thought she might cry. Then she gathered herself, as people in authority always do when grief would make them too honest. "And the children? I dismissed them too. All of them? I think so." Dr. Rusk walked to the well and looked at the broken chain. She did not look down. Smart woman. The county will need to seal it. I looked at her. Who locked it the first time? She did not answer immediately. The morning wind moved through the grass. Finally, she said, "The county." I stepped back from her. She saw the movement. "This time," she said quietly, "that answer is true." I don't know if I believe you. You shouldn't. We stood there in the cold dawn. Then the schoolhouse door opened. Paige stepped out. Alive, modern clothes, green backpack. Behind her came Caleb, Eli, Mara, June, Hannah, and Luke, all 7. They looked sleepy, confused, but alive. June ran to Dr. Rusk and hugged her around the waist. Luke walked to me. In his hand was a drawing. My chest tightened. He handed it over. It showed Mercy Wells Schoolhouse, a road leading away, 7 children walking down it, a teacher standing in the doorway, not Mrs. Weller, me. There was no well in the picture. "Did I do it right?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Yes." His shoulders relaxed. "Good." Then his father's truck appeared over the hill, followed by the county van, the other pickup, and Hannah and Luke's horse trotting riderless into the yard like it had known where to be. The normal morning arrived in pieces. Parents, questions, Dr. Rusk lying smoothly. "A gas leak," she said. "An emergency overnight shelter-in-place drill gone wrong. A broken well cover. A substitute who had handled things well. Nobody believed all of it, but rural people know when not to ask certain questions in front of children. By noon, county workers arrived. They brought concrete, rebar, warning signs, equipment, and a silence around them that told me they had been briefed in a way no official document would ever admit. They filled the well. I watched. No voices came from it. No knocking. No multiplication. When the first concrete slid down into the dark, the schoolhouse bell rang once. Not loud, not frightening, just once. Dr. Rusk closed her eyes. The workers pretended not to hear. I left Mercy Well that evening, before sunset. Dr. Rusk offered to have someone drive me. I said no. I packed my bag from the teacher's room. The nailed curtain was gone. The window now showed only the filled well and the turning windmill. On the teacher's desk sat the black composition notebook. My name was no longer on the masking tape. The cover was blank. I opened it. The 25 rules were still there, but the first page had changed, for the substitute had been crossed out. Under it, in Mrs. Weller's careful handwriting, were 3 words: "No substitute needed." I took the notebook anyway. I don't know why. Maybe because Dr. Rusk would have hidden it. Maybe because I was afraid the school would write in it again if I left it behind. Maybe because some part of me understood that surviving a place like Mercy Well makes you responsible for remembering it correctly. The drive out felt longer than the drive in. I passed the leaning cottonwood, the 3rd cattle guard, the windmill line. Then I reached the fork with the white mailbox. M. Wells School. The red flag was down now. I stopped the car. The smart thing would have been to keep driving. I got out. The mailbox stood silent. No knocking, no movement. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of chalk. White, worn down to a nub, wrapped in a strip of red ribbon from the lunch pail. I left it there. I closed the mailbox and drove away. I never went back to Mercy Well Schoolhouse. Not in person. Dr. Rusk called me 2 weeks later to say the school had been permanently closed. The 7 students were transferred to town. Parents complained about the drive, but nobody fought the decision too hard after Luke refused to enter the building again, and Paige told her father there were too many names in the walls. The county listed the closure as structural instability. Technically, that was true. The schoolhouse still stands. I checked once on satellite view. White roof, small yard, windmill shadow, no visible well. But sometimes online maps show roads that do not exist. And sometimes I think I see a line leading from the old schoolhouse into the hills, drawn like a child's pencil path. A road away. I am still a teacher. I thought I would quit after Mercy Well. For a while, I tried. I worked in an office for 3 months and hated every second of it. Eventually, I went back to classrooms. Normal classrooms, modern ones. Fluorescent lights, smart boards, fire drills, lunch orders, lost jumpers, glue sticks with no lids, and children asking questions they already know the answers to. I like normal problems now. A student talking during instructions, a parent email written in all caps, a printer jam 5 minutes before a lesson. Those are blessings. But I still have rules. I count students by name, always. Arrival, transitions, recess, lunch, dismissal. If the class goes quiet all at once, I close the blinds before asking why. If a child draws a house with no doors, I keep the drawing. I never correct a voice I hear through the floor. And I never, ever ring a school bell twice. Last October, on a windy afternoon, one of my Year 3 students raised his hand during maths. He looked confused, a little embarrassed. "Miss Carter," he said, "is 12 times 12 145? The room went cold. Not actually, maybe. I looked at the floor. No dust, no knocking, no voices underneath. Just 24 children waiting for me to answer. I smiled gently and said, "Let's work it out together." That was different. A living child, a real classroom, a correct lesson. He counted 12 groups of 12 blocks and got 144. He laughed at himself. I laughed too. But that afternoon, when the students left, I counted them by name at the door, every single one. And when I got home, the black composition notebook was on my kitchen table. I keep it locked in a drawer. I know I locked it that morning. On the open page, beneath Rule 25, someone had written a new line. Rule 26. If a child from Mercy Well answers correctly, do not praise them until you know who taught them. I have not written in the notebook since. I have not thrown it away either, because rules are not curses. Not exactly. Rules are what survivors leave behind when they cannot stay to explain. So, if you ever take a substitute job in a one-room schoolhouse somewhere far out in the Nebraska Sandhills, and the last teacher leaves you a notebook, read it. If an 8th desk appears, leave it empty. If a child you don't recognize answers roll, mark them absent. If the bell rings by itself, put their heads down. And if a student asks whether school is over, be very careful before you answer. Because some schools do not close when the children leave. Some schools keep teaching underground. And some wells are not deep because they reach water. They are deep because they reach classrooms that were never dismissed.